Hi guys, I'm Denis from Respect Studios, and this is the first tutorial of a series that will be intended for explaining about Unity extensions. How you can write extensions for the editor, either if it's editor windows or custom inspectors. Um, I will make a set of tools that you will be able to use in your projects. They will ease your workflow, speed up your workflow, or do some stuff that otherwise you can't do in the editor. Now, first of all, about the what is Unity extensions, for the people that are not aware or have never wrote something like this, it's tools, custom tools that you can write for the Unity editor. You can use them to speed up your workflow. Sometimes you can use them to do stuff that you cannot do otherwise if you don't have them. Uh, just for example, some very popular extensions for the editor are like Shader Forge. This is now you can write shaders on your own if you want to, but if you don't know how or you don't want to spend so much time, you can get Shader Forge, for example. Uh, Simple Unity extension is I have a small tool here which is called copy multi-component. This is, for example, a tool that you can copy components from one object to another. So I'm just showing how a certain extension works. So I'm going to select these cubes and I will duplicate them. Now on this one I will add rigid body, I will add audio listener, I will add the hinge joint, and so on and so on. So I can add a lot of stuff. The thing is that let's say that you have this cube and you have all these other cubes that you don't have the components on them, but you want all of them to have the same components, although they are different objects. Let's say that they are not cubes but something else. So you can simply select the cube, select the rigid body, copy it, copy component, select all of the other objects and paste component as new. So you can paste it to all of them. The problem is that you have to do that with every component. So in this case, the multi-component is helping you to copy all of the components at once and not spend time if you have a lot of components. So you simply drag the source object here, select all of the target objects here, and then you type copy components, and now all of the objects have all of the components that this cube had. This is just a simple example of editor extensions. Another example is I have another tool, which by the way I will show you how to write in some of the later lessons, which is called Safe Runtime Changes. Now, I have several years of experience with Unity, and if you are working on a real project, you know that most of the time you, or maybe not most of the time, but sometimes you need to be able to adjust some stuff while you are in a play mode. So let's say that you have something like a platform, okay, and you have these cubes. I will make them like this. So something like this. So let's say that your player, actually I don't need this. Let's say that your player have to jump on these, and you have to adjust them depending on how far the player can jump. So but the problem is that if you want your player to jump from this to here, and then from here to here, you have to enter play mode and jump with the player. Just example. But when you jump with the player, you can adjust them. Okay. The problem is that if you adjust them and you exit play mode, they get back to the original positions where they were before you enter play mode. So you have only one option here. You can select one of them, adjust it, come here to the transform, copy the component, exit play mode, and then paste component values to return these. But the problem is that you have to enter and exit play mode for every object that you have to adjust. So I wrote a simple tool which is intended specifically for transforms. I wrote it for transforms, but it can copy absolutely every component. And not copy, but save the changes on every component when you exit play mode. So how it works is pretty much when you start it, it says enter play mode. When you enter play mode, it's going to change, and it's have this big button which is start recording. And since it's making something like a temporary object for every object that you record in the scene, you have a limit of 50 objects per runtime session. So every time you enter runtime, you can record up to 50 objects, and then you have to exit runtime and enter runtime again to continue recording other objects. So simply you have to do is start recording, and whenever you select an object, you're going to see a label which is called recorded, and if that object is selected, you will see all of the components below that object. So you can pretty much select all of them, including the camera if you want. So we're going to adjust the camera to watch these like this. We will adjust their size, for example. We will move them. You can see that I can turn off everything, and it will not record nothing for this object. So I can turn off only the transform, or I can turn off only the box collider. So for example, this object will be moved here, and I will change its box collider like this. And when I exit play mode, it will go back to its original position, but the box collider will be saved. Sorry. So for this one, I will move it here. This one I will rotate it, for example. And now you see I have 6 objects recorded. So if I exceed the limit of 50 objects, it will stop recording, and it will let me know that I have to exit play mode. I can clear the recorded changes, so nothing gets saved when I exit play mode. And you can see now I will move this here, so this one will be back here, but the collider will be recorded, will be saved. This one I will make its collider slightly bigger, and this one's collider I will make slightly bigger on X. So when I exit play mode, you can see the colliders are recorded, the camera is watching at the objects. So this is something interesting that can save you a lot of time. It has some small limitations, but like I said, we will write this in some of the later lessons, and I will show you absolutely everything step by step how to write it. So let's get started with editor extensions. First of all, you need to make one important folder which is called editor. This way Unity knows that the scripts in this folder are intended for editor extensions, either if it's for custom inspectors or editor windows or so on. You can name your, for example, we can type menu test. I will type that 01 menu test, and you can put the editor inside. So for every tool that you write, you can make a folder which is a parent folder with the name of the tool, and then inside you can make an editor. So let's make one script and name it example menu. Okay. Now when you open that script like this, we don't need start. Now if you are going to just make a menu item which executes some command, you can inherit from editor. There's usually, well, first of all you have to type you have to use the namespace using Unity editor, because all of the editor commands are coming from this namespace. So if you want to write the editor window, we have to type editor window here. But if we're going to write just a menu, we can use the editor keyword. Okay, so now first of all, when you make a menu, you have to start with menu item. Okay, and if we check inside the docs, menu item attribute allows you to add the menu items, the main menu, and the inspector context menu. You can add a menu item. So let's add one simple menu item, which will be called my menus / and we'll call it example menu. It doesn't matter how you call it, you can call it whatever you like. Okay. Is validate function, we will talk about this later. I'll type just false, and priority is how the menu items are stacked. So if you have more than one menu item, for this I will type 1. And for a menu item to work, if I go back to Unity now, I will get an error. In this error is pretty much because I don't have a function. Every menu item have to call a function which have to be static. So that function have to be right below the menu item. So it's called when you call the menu item. So we'll say static void example menu. And inside for now we'll call debug.log menu preset. When I go back to Unity, example menu members name cannot be the same as their exclusive type. Okay, the example menu, okay, don't name the methods the same as the class. So example menu test. Okay, like this. And now, if you go here, you will see that you have another menu, which is called my menu. And inside you have a menu item, which is called example menu. So if I press it, you will see, okay, one more time, menu pressed. So you can call absolutely everything here. Now, first of all, you can do something very interesting here. Let's say that you are getting bored every time you start a project. You have to make all these folders, which is materials, scenes, scripts, prefabs, and so on and so on. So let's make something simple. When we call that menu item, we're going to say asset database that create folder, and the string, the parent folder, will be assets, and the name of the folder will be scenes. Let's see what will happen now. If we call menu, example menu, we have a folder named scenes. So what you can do pretty much is get this, duplicate it a few times, and then just go materials, scripts, shaders, sprites, textures, models, animations, and then we save it. And let's see, let's remove that scenes folder. And so every time you start a new project, you can pretty much select this menu test, export it as a package, and every time when you start a new project, you can just import that menu, example menu, or whatever you call it. You can call it create folder assets, folder structure, and then you can call, let's just change the name so it's not folder structure. Okay. And when you start a new project, you can go to my menus, folder structure, and boom, all of your folders are created. You don't need to create them all the time, name them, and so on. So this is cool. You can create game objects if you want for quickly. For example, game object that create primitive, you can use that. So you can go game object that create primitive. You can create, for example, primitive type that cube. and we are going to name. Do we have to name? Oh, game object plain. So yeah, we have to assign it to a game object. Okay, so we have to do, these are some game object. Cube will be equal to game object create primitive cube. So it should be named cube, but I'm not sure. Let's try that out. My menus, folder structure. Yeah, it's named cube, and it creates a cube. So you can use the menus to create something, right? This is cool. So let's start with the real business. Let's remove all these things. Now, if you want, so first of all, if you want to make an editor window and not just some commands which execute a piece of code, you have to change this to editor window. So Unity knows that you're going to call an editor window. And I will change this to editor extensions, and here I will type the name of our first window that we're going to write, which will be rename window. So rename window is going to call a window that we will rename a simple object. Static void, we're going to change the name of the static void to init, just because for initialization, just it's smaller. And now we're going to say example menu, which have to be the same type as the class, because this is the actual window that we're going to be calling. And we'll name it example. We're not going to name it example menu just because that name sucks. We're going to type it. By the way, you can change the name of the, by pressing F2, you can change the name of the script and the class, which is safer. Rename GUI. We're going to name it rename GUI because it sounds better. Here I'm going to back to Unity. So it changed to rename GUI. And now I will say rename GUI, which will be the name of our variable, which will be equal to, we have to cast the type rename GUI, and we'll say editor window dot get window. We need a type, so we'll type off, and again rename GUI. And that's it. Now we have stored the actual window that we want to name. Now we can type rename GUI that title content, which will be, no, title was before, I think it was in version 4 of Unity. In version 5 you use title content, so you have to do new GUI content, and now you can type string for the name of the title. So we're simply going, you can add image, by the way, you can have an GUI title, you can have string and image, you can have tooltip and so on. So for now we're going to type just a name, rename object. So rename GUI, we are going to actually not rename GUI, we're going to rename GUI, the actual name of the variable. We're going to say min size. This is how you can use minimum size, so you can restrict the UI to be scaled to a minimum size and not less. So we're going to type width of min size is going to be equal to new vector 2, and it will be width of 200 and height of 300. And lastly, we're going to say rename GUI that show. That's it. And when we go back to Unity, we have editor extensions, rename window, and now we have a window which is absolutely empty. We can dock it, by the way. If you want, there is an option to make it utility undockable. So if I say here true for the window and I close it, open it again, you can see now you can't dock it. So it's a window that it's non-dockable, and sometimes that's very important, specifically for the window that I was using for safe runtime changes, because if you dock it, I'm going to show you why. If you get a window and dock it somewhere, and then you hit the shift and spacebar to maximize the view, that window is not in focus anymore, and all of the commands are not getting executed. So sometimes the window have to be non-dockable to be able to stay always on the screen, so you can use it. This is the exact case for the safe runtime changes. And so this is for this window now. Now there's something very important, another thing. You can make it slightly different. Now you can see how it looks like with that border, which you can use to scale, but you can't make it smaller. Now if you say rename GUI that max size equals new vector to 200 by 300, if you make the max and min size the same, the GUI will actually lose its border and it will look differently. You can see it like this. Now this looks cool, but sometimes you can lose it because if you position it here, you are hardly seeing it. Okay, so I tend to not use this, just for that. Okay, that's for this tutorial. In the next tutorial I will continue feeding up stuff inside the UI and make it working, so we can rename a simple game object when we press it, which is something very simple, but it will show you interesting stuff for starting point on how to write editor windows. Thank you.